Today on Fulfilled as a Mom, we have Abby Green. Abby is a mom to three, a full-time entrepreneur who quit her job in corporate America to be able to spend more time with her kids. She's sharing with us her story of navigating a Down syndrome diagnosis for her youngest, moving out of corporate America and into entrepreneurship, navigating anxiety, and how she's showing up well in her everyday life to be the most fulfilled version of herself. I hope you enjoy this chat with the one, the only Abby Green. I'm Tracy Bingaman. I'm a full-time working mom of 5 who got sick, burned out, quit my job, and now I teach women how to mom smarter, not harder. The pressures of modern motherhood are intense. You're a busy working mom juggling all the balls and living in fear of dropping the exact wrong one. Here you'll find the tools you've been searching for to confidently prioritize your life and optimize your ability to rock all the hats that you choose to wear. I'll show you how to break through your limiting beliefs so you'll have more time and more money than you know what to do with. Because even in the busiest seasons of life, you can grow to master your money, own your time, and be the mom with all the margin. This is Fulfilled as a Mom. All right, Abby, thank you so much for joining us.
I am so looking forward to this, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get this party started with a little introduction. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love to do.
Yeah, so I am Abby Green. On Instagram, I'm Abby Rose Green, but mostly people call me Mom. I'm the mom of 3. So I have a 5-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and then 1.5-year-old. I also co-host and co-own the Herself podcast and Pursuing Her Purpose. So all of these podcasts, all of these businesses, it's kind of like that best friend that you had growing up that would always tell you what you needed to hear, but then also comfort you when you needed that as well. That's really what we're trying to do with our Instagram accounts, with our podcasts, with our guests, and just with everything that we're putting into the world, because there needs to be more truth, but there also needs to be some solidarity. So the combination of both has been my cup of tea lately.
Yes, and you guys are absolutely rocking that. I'm a big fan of yours and all of the shows that you create. So this year you have rocked a lot of changes. You left your job, you bought a new home, you moved, you really leaned into entrepreneurship. How has that transition been? How have you navigated it? How are the kids doing?
So as somebody who does not like change, I'm your typical type A firstborn, like everything has a plan and everything follows that plan. It's been a hard year that way because there has been a lot of change. But in my mind, just reframing that all of the changes are good and then believing that. It's easy to say that, right, Tracy? It's easy to say, this is going to be a good change until you're in it and it's so stressful and it's so tiring and you're exhausted at the end of the day. But really every single one of the changes has just been so good. And they also weren't like fly by the seat of your pants type of changes. I mean, quitting my job. So I was in corporate America for 13 years in sales roles, and I went part-time and then quit completely in April of 2021. And that's when the Herself podcast was really starting to bloom. And I knew at that point, Tracy, that I wasn't able to do both well and be the mother, wife, and friend and individual who I wanted to be. So something had to give. And most people will look at that and say, why would you leave your stable job? Of all those titles, why would you leave this stable job? And honestly, it's because I knew there was so much more for me in those other roles that I hadn't been tapping into. And just fast forward about a year now, a little bit less than a year, and I am so glad I made that decision. Parts of me wish I would have made that decision before I made it, but I also know that that was a big part of my story. Yeah.
So how did that work as far as you and Colin, like navigating you saying like, hey, so I think I might want to leave this job I've had for the entire time we've known each other. How did that go?
It had been a conversation since Lucy was born. So Lucy's our oldest and she's 5. And when she was born, I just felt this tug at my heart for more purpose. I loved my job and I loved who I was in that role, but I also knew that there was a need to help mothers who were like me. Mothers that were thrown into motherhood and it just wasn't what they were expecting, or they saw everything around was so perfect, but it wasn't perfect for them. And I wasn't able to do that in my role. I was working mostly with old businessmen traveling across the United States, wearing high heels and lipstick and going to fancy dinners. And the family talk barely even got brought up. So it just was really hard to separate myself so much from being a mom and then being a businesswoman. Colin actually, I mean, he had me, he wished I would have left years and years ago because I just talked about it so much. I would bring it up to him continuously and just, this is the tug at my heart. I'm having these feelings again. And it wasn't until Her Self podcast became, right away from the start, we had an incredible audience. My partner, Amy Kiefer, she just has such an engaged following, and they were able to jump on the bandwagon right away. And that's when I started really feeling like, okay, I could do this, and I should probably put some plans into place to do this. But Colin was definitely on board before I was.
That's so great. And, it's interesting to hear you say that. I was just sharing on an episode about how I also identify as like a type A achiever, and I had done all the things like well. And then I became a mom and I was like, wait, what? Like, this is the thing that's going to trip me up? Like, this thing that's supposed to be so natural. Like, everyone makes it seem like it's not hard. Like, you give birth and your heart expands and suddenly you know all the answers and like motherhood just comes easily. And I was struggling and I was like, am I the only one? Like, no one warned me that this was going to be so hard.
Yeah, exactly. And they just don't warn you. They tell you about all the good things, or they tell you about like the little nuances, but they don't tell you about the day-to-day heaviness that can be found in motherhood without adding that silver lining on it immediately. And I mean, that's just kind of the era that we grew up in was, oh, this is so hard. And it's like, yes, that is very true. It is so hard and it's so rewarding. But it also is just hard. Like, can we just say that some parts of this are also very difficult and just sink into that part of it?
Yeah. And I do. I think it takes a village, but it's only really helpful if that village is vulnerable, that sometimes they struggle also.
Agreed. 100%.
For sure. So you have shared a lot about Owen joining your family, kind of what that has looked like, becoming one of the lucky few. And as a fan and a follower of yours, it has been so humbling to see you navigate that season and share kind of what that looked like for you. When you guys first found out about Owen, and I'll let you kind of share what that looks like in your life, right away, did you feel like that, or was that a little bit of a process for you?
Yeah, so let's talk about that lucky few. So the meaning behind the lucky few is that our son Owen, he's our third born, so he's a year and a half old, and he was born with Down syndrome. So he has an extra 21st chromosome. Every piece of him has that extra 21st chromosome, but it also doesn't define every piece of him. It gives him some adorable characteristics. So his almond eyes, his chubby cheeks, the fact that he's a year and a half and he's the size of a 9-month-old and just still can squish into me in the best way. But he's also so much more than just that piece of it. And I think when we found out, and I say we, but it was actually just me. So he's also a pandemic baby. So in April of 2020, I went in for my normal 20-week ultrasound, and they almost didn't even have it, Tracy, because I was having a normal, healthy pregnancy. I hadn't had any doctor appointments besides like the 6-week, very, very first checkup at that point. Hadn't seen a doctor in person. And they're like, you know what? Like, let's do this. Let's do this now, just to check on baby. And then we probably won't see you back for a while. And I remember it took so long. The appointment was so long. And not that I wasn't grateful for that, because it was cool to see glimpses of your baby and other sides of it. But after an hour and a half, 2 hours, you're like, okay, like, this is my third kid. I know how this is going. My husband's not here. Just give me some photos and let's go on. And at that point, that's when several different doctors came in. They were all standing 6 feet apart. They all had the full PPE apparel. And they were saying these really scary words like chromosomal abnormalities, a heart defect, a brain cyst, bloody bowels. And I was like, what? Like, my baby? What? And I didn't have any indication during the pregnancy. We don't have a history of chromosomal abnormalities. So it just came as a total surprise. And the fact that my husband wasn't there for that was really, really difficult. I mean, we were ushered to, and I say we, I keep on saying we because it was me and Owen at that point.
Sure.
I had no idea who he
Yeah.
was, but with all these strangers, we were brought to, talk to the genetic specialist and then talk to, like, what are your next steps going to be? And we just hadn't had any conversations about like, what do we do at this point? We knew we wouldn't terminate. And that was like one of the big things at that point is they're like, you can still terminate. We're like, whoa. Like I came in for my 20-week anatomy scan. Like this baby is my baby, regardless of what he or she is and what he or she is made of and what you're telling me right now. So it was just, a landslide into becoming third-time parents between the pandemic pregnancy, which I know many of your listeners have had children in the pandemic. It's just nothing. It's like nothing else. I mean, individuals who are now having their second pregnancy or second baby in the pandemic, they just don't know what a normal or a typical pregnancy can be like. But I guess through this experience, that's also another nudge into why I am doing what I'm doing and kind of left the corporate world is because I can help people like Owen and I can help others like you and your community and the community that surrounds me to learn about Owen as we learn. Like it is such a humbling experience, Tracy, because I don't have all the answers, but we're finding them slowly. And that's been just so cool to see.
Yeah. And it's awesome to see you kind of growing into that role and also sharing with your followers, like these parts have been hard and this has been joyful. And it's not all just really adorable pictures of babies and letterboards. Like I feel like you're doing a really great job of sharing behind the scenes and things that surprised you and tripped you up along the way as you're figuring this out. That's been really wonderful to see. So I think that as a community, when we talk about this, sometimes we don't talk about it or we don't know what to say, or I guess almost as importantly, what not to say. And so I think sometimes that makes us not have the conversation at all because we don't, oh, you're not supposed to say disabled, but what do you say? Or what, differently abled, or what are things that in this journey that you've come across that are we supposed to just ask you, like, what do you want us to, say about Owen, or how do you want us to bring this up? How has that kind of showed up in the way that you interact with people around this?
Yeah, first of all, I'm so glad that you asked this question because it's one of those questions that, just like you said, people are like, can I ask this? Is this rude? Am I going to be offensive? And then instead of being offensive or rude and still curious, it's just the question comes off the table. And if we learned anything about 2020 is that diversity and inclusion matters. And we have to be doing the research ourselves and we have to be figuring this out for ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to grow up. And I say that because we are still learning and growing into adults and further adults that don't have these answers. And then we're teaching our kids the exact same. So I don't know about you, but I want my kids to learn, even if it means that they trip up a little bit and they say the wrong thing. I want them to learn in a safe place. And that is one thing that I do with my Instagram page, with my friends, with podcasts like this is let's learn in a safe place. So ask the questions. Get the responses from somebody who is open about these conversations. So I will start by saying I said many of the wrong things before having a child with special needs as well. I did. I was not perfect beforehand. I'm still not perfect. And one big thing too is that it's not lumped into, like, special needs isn't lumped into one big category. So some people might be offended by the word disabled. Other people might be not offended by that word. Some people might say differently abled. Others might say, there's all these different words with it. One thing I have learned though is the word normal, that is usually offensive to most people. So the word typical is just a nice, easy word that you can add to your vocabulary. So we have 2 typical children and 1 with special needs. So it's an easy way that you can just start to pull that into your vocabulary, teaching your children, because the word normal, it's like, well, our son's normal. Our son's normal. And then that normal just doesn't have the right feeling with it. But typical versus special needs. Also, first person language. That's something that I'm learning about right now. And children with autism, for instance, it might differ than children with or people with Down syndrome. So in the Down syndrome community, we wouldn't want to be referred to as like that Down's baby. But somebody in the autistic community, it might not be as offensive. And I'm, again, speaking not in complete certainty because some people may still hold offense to that, but just asking the parent, being like, hey, like, And even if you like feel really, really nervous about it, just be like your child, like Owen, just refer to them as their name, Owen. Like if you really, really start to get nervous about it. And then as you get more comfortable being like, hey, like I'm learning with this, I want to be able to teach my children what is best. But instead of saying that Down's child or that Down's baby, being like child with Down syndrome, because in the Down syndrome community, we believe that it's just a small piece of them and doesn't wholly define them. What else? Like, what other questions do you have on this piece of it? Because there's a lot of different areas that we can go with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. How do those conversations make you feel? So like if you and I meet and we're at the park and I'm like, the thing about Owen is that you can see he has physical characteristics that make it clear to me that there is something different or less typical about Owen than your other kids. Does it make you uncomfortable when people say, like, address it, or that's just become like part of the day-to-day for you?
It's become part of the day-to-day, and I wonder if it'll get more weird as we're further into it. But for a while there, Tracy, I honestly was more nervous that they didn't address it, because I was more nervous. I'm like, what are they thinking instead? Like, what are they thinking instead? Why won't they talk about this? Like, are they trying to move away because they're scared of our family, that they're nervous with our family? I would rather talk about it than to cover it up, kind of a deal. But yeah, I wholeheartedly jump into those conversations. It's also been really interesting because Colin and I, my husband, we didn't personally grow up knowing anybody with Down syndrome. I mean, there was just very, very few acquaintances that we even came into contact with. So we just grew up in a society or in a community where it wasn't a bad association with Down syndrome, is that we had no association with Down syndrome. So we just didn't learn any of it. So the fact that there's people in the world who are like, you know what, I'm a little bit curious about this, I want to, it's really, really good for the next generation.
Yeah. And I think it's important for our kids to see us not knowing. So for us to see us like, because, sometimes they'll ask us questions like, why does that person have a leg that's not made of skin at the grocery store? And I'm like, okay, I don't really know the answer to that. But also, like, when we get in the car, it's a good opportunity to talk about how, sometimes people are born without this. Sometimes there's an accident. Sometimes something happens. And, it might make them uncomfortable to overhear you exclaiming with joy about their robotic leg, so, and you don't, as a parent, I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like, we have to know all the right answers so that when our kids ask those questions, we have the answers. But I think it's okay to say, like, I don't really know how to address that. Like, what do you think would be a good way for us to, like, if we see a person at a party who has a prosthetic leg, like, how could we approach that? And it's not weird. It's just different than the way that our legs look.
Yeah. And even going to Google or going to like a safe place to research together with your child to be like, you know what? Mom actually doesn't know. I don't know this answer, but let's find out the answer together. It's the same thing when our children see us making mistakes. It's a good thing when they see us making mistakes, because then they realize that we don't have it all together either, and we can recover from it and learn from it and grow from it. So all those pieces, like, it's really just part of the big puzzle of we are humans. Our children deserve to see us being humans as well.
Busy working mom. I used to wear it like a badge of honor. Then I realized that I was drowning in to-dos and running around like a lunatic, all because this key piece was missing. I wasn't clear on what my deeply held values were. And when everything's important, nothing is important. Now that I've done the work and figured out what I value most, it makes life so much easier. Those core values serve as the compass for the direction of my life, and they inform my heck yes and my hell no responses to each and every opportunity. I've taken the process to curate core values and boiled it down into 3 simple steps. I've laid out the exact process to gain clarity so you can start applying your deeply held values to day-to-day life. To start living a purpose-driven life full of what you love and void of all that other shit, download your core value curator today. The link's waiting for you in the show notes. I think our generation has really taken it upon ourselves as moms to kind of pull back the curtain, not only for each other, which I think has really great value, but also for them. So I don't know if this is true for you. When I was growing up, I just assumed my parents knew everything, because they just kind of seemed like they knew everything and I didn't know otherwise. So, like, I think that we're saying well, I don't actually know how jet engines work, honey, but we can like look it up together. Do you feel like that's happening in your world? Like you're saying a little bit like, I'm growing up too. I don't know all the answers to all the things. Are you sharing that with your kids?
Oh yeah. And not just with diversity and inclusion, but with, yeah, like you said, a jet engine or the things that are, and our kids are only going to get older and older and older and have more questions that we are not going to be able to answer. So getting used to them on the easier questions or the ones that we can not feel as uncomfortable answering, and then getting into the tougher stuff as they get older.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, puberty is coming for all of them. So they will ask questions about that. And so, I mean, jet engines, at least I can Google,
Right. And age appropriate, right? Like if a child is asking about private parts, but they're asking, something very specific, it's like, well, what do they need to know right now? They probably don't need to know, the ins and outs of the birds and the bees and all the details that goes into it. But could they know that, men and women differ in these ways?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My 3-year-old asked me the other day, when will I grow boobs around my nipples?
Oh, yes.
I'm like, well, it'll be a while. If dad had a vote, it would be never, right? Like, it would be like absolutely never. I'm like, probably like 10 years. We don't need to get into the whole thing.
We don't need to get into it. Yep, 10 years. It's a long way away. It's like 10 years.
Which for you seems like forever. So I wouldn't worry about it today. It'll be fine.
Oh, so funny.
So a couple of things that I wanted to kind of ask about you sort of navigating life with Owen. What has been one of the hardest things that you guys have had to kind of tackle, overcome, to come to terms with along this journey?
Yeah, so there's a lot of doctor appointments and check-ins. And I had no idea about this. And they started in pregnancy. So I went from not having any medical care to all of a sudden going in 2 or 3 times a week, every single week. And he was always healthy at that point. He always came back with good numbers, but it was always just a check-in just to make sure. So even in pregnancy, they do NST, so stress tests. They're testing for, growth charts. They're doing heart scans because he had a heart issue when he was in utero. They were checking his brain cyst to see if that was getting bigger or what was going on with that. So it just was so much all at once. And then when they're born, it doesn't stop. So now we go in for eye checks and ear checks and therapy appointments, physical therapy, speech therapy, and those pretty much start right away. And he does a great job with them, but you still need to get the checks. So that's just been a hard part in all of it, is navigating. We both have full-time jobs. And when I was traveling or in my corporate America job, it wasn't flexible. So that was another really big push on, I got to make my own money doing my own thing, because this is not going to work for our 3-person family with the third needing extra medical attention. Just not going to work.
Yeah. It's that one thing that you realize we were okay until one more thing, one extra element gets added to the plate. And then you have to kind of step back and say, something has to give. And it's not going to be my kid's health, right? It's not going to be getting him to these things. And, how can we navigate that as a family, and who's going to be available, right? Who's going to provide health insurance? Who's going to be available? Like all of these things really matter as you're navigating this. On the flip side, what is something that you were really worried about that turned out to be not such a big deal?
Everything else. Like everything else. I love that question, because we were only told, and it's not the medical industry's fault, but from all of our doctors, and I'm saying all, and I should just say most, for most of our doctors, they were saying all the hard things that we were going to face, all of the difficulties our child would have, how our marriage could be, it would be more difficult, how our relationship with our other children would be harder because of the time spent. Like all these things are what we were told. And even the books about Down syndrome, like the older books about Down syndrome that we were handed, were all like the hard things, the issues that could happen, the blah, blah, blah. And then when he was born, his brain cyst went away. His heart condition was very, very minimal. That ended up going away a couple months later. He no longer had blood in his bowels. Like all of these things just weren't issues once he was born. And we're like, okay, so we set ourselves up. I mean, he was able to even be with me, Tracy. Like he was supposed to be, he was also breech. So there's that part of it. He was breech for a long time. We were able to flip him right at the last minute. But he was supposed to be a C-section, taken away by C-section, brought to the NICU right away for a couple days, couple weeks. They didn't know. And he was able to be born through the most beautiful natural vaginal delivery and was with me.
Oh my gosh,
right
that's
away.
Amazing.
So the fact that it went from just polar opposites, it was so beautiful to be part of that experience.
And so I'm curious, I know this happened, the diagnosis and your delivery both happened during the pandemic. So did you guys have an opportunity to meet a kid or an adult who also has a 3/21st chromosome? So you were kind of like, just like hearing, because it kind of feels like no one told you about the way that they smile or the joy that they bring, like all of the good things that you can expect.
And even to this day, so we're still in the pandemic. It's like, it hasn't opened up that much, especially in the special needs community. So we still have yet to meet somebody outside of our very close circle who has Down syndrome. So we're part of Gigi's Playhouse. We're part of the Down Syndrome Networks of Wisconsin. We're part of all of these organizations, but we haven't gone there in person yet. But kind of crazy, and this is a little bit off topic, but goes along with that, is that two of our closest friends, so close that my husband actually officiated their wedding when I was 35 weeks pregnant. They got pregnant right away after their wedding, and they had a baby girl 9 months later who was born with Down syndrome.
Wow.
So of all the people in the world, I mean, there's only 6,000 babies a year born with Down syndrome, and two of our closest friends happen to have a baby girl with Down syndrome. So we're already making wedding plans and figuring out who's wearing what to their wedding and where they're going to live and all that stuff, of course. But it's just been really cool to navigate this journey alongside them and learn with them as we've been through this. So if it was for anything in this world, and I know that we're able to help a lot of people with our story, but being able to help that family specifically, and Allie and Joey, being able to do this life with you. And I just think we're going to become even closer as our kids get closer.
Yes, that's so amazing. And I think that the beauty of the internet is that if you don't happen to have a very best friend who has a kid that looks like yours, you can find people like you or other people who are sharing their story. And there is so much power in the sharing because it makes other people know that they're not alone.
Yes. Yes. And that was the number one thing that saved me, especially in those early weeks between, and it was even days, because it was between when we find out the soft markers and getting the amniocentesis and then getting the results from the amniocentesis. Those were full of uncertainty. And we were able to connect with many members of the Lucky Few online through Instagram. And we still talk to them often. And I feel like I know them, kind of like this conversation, Tracy, right? Like we feel like we know each other because we've seen each other. We've been able to interact online. But to touch them, I want to be able to hug them. And I want our kids to be able to high five each other. And I'm really looking forward to that day when it's safe for all of us just to do that haphazardly and not have to worry about anything and not have to worry about plans being canceled last minute. But right now, they're still internet friends, but they're dang good internet friends.
I mean, it's so wonderful to have that community. And the fact that they don't have to live in your town anymore is magic.
Right. Especially in a community that is so small. There's not that many people born every year with Down syndrome. So finding people who are like us, who have a kid rocking that extra chromosome, who happen to be a baby as well, it's difficult to find, but we have definitely been able to do it online.
So great. Now, if you're willing, I have seen you sharing a little bit lately about sort of navigating some anxiety and some sort of things that have sort of cropped up for you this year, which is totally understandable given all of the changes and all of the things that you're navigating. How has that how are you doing? How are things going, if you're willing to share?
Of course. Yeah. And if we're not willing to share these types of things, then it just makes other people silently suffer as well. But my therapist explained it so well. She's like, Abby, we're all wired for depression and anxiety. We just all have really, really nice, tight wires with great coding. But then the pandemic happens and some of the wires get exposed. And then you get pregnant in a pandemic and more wires get exposed. Then you get a diagnosis and then you get in a fight and then you have this and this and this. And all of a sudden you have all these wires that are exposed. And therapy, medications, self-care, those things just coat your wires. They put on that electrical tape that goes over those wires and just makes you feel like you again. And that was really the learning lesson that I needed through this whole experience. What I think it kind of stems down to is undiagnosed postpartum depression and anxiety. And it may not have even been after Owen, but after Micah, who was our second. And just being like, I'm fine. I have it pulled together. And as somebody who has had high functioning anxiety since I was young, I was able to make it work until you can't. Like until all of a sudden it just overcomes your whole body and you're like, what the heck is happening? I was like sweating profusely. I started having some panic attacks. I wasn't sleeping well at night. I mean, that is still happening for a few different reasons. And after trying the self-care, trying to delete things off my plate, trying to ask for help, that's when I end up going on Zoloft, or the off-brand of Zoloft. And I am so glad that I did it. It was one of those experiences, though, that for anybody who's listening, who knows that those first couple of days and weeks of like holding that prescription bottle in your hand, you're looking at it, you're like, do I do it? Do I do it? Do I do it? And then you take that first pill and you're like, oh my gosh, should I have done that? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then you have these side effects. So it's like you start to get the help that you need. And then all of a sudden there's these side effects of like nausea and more sweating and weird sleep and not being able to eat. And you're like, wait a minute, like I'm trying to get help. And
Then you feel better,
I know,
right?
and I'm not feeling better. But after about 2 weeks, those side effects went away. And now it's been, I don't know, probably 3 months. And it takes that edge off of life. Like it just takes that edge off of the things that were so high and so low. And it's just made me feel a whole lot more like me.
And I think that's the goal. Like the goal of medication for anything is not to like erase part of you or like, take things away. It's to make it so that you can live your life in a way that feels good and feels the way you want to.
And I was so nervous that I was going to take my edge away, that I was going to take that part of me that was that like achiever, that driven, that motivated side of me. And it didn't. And I'm actually going to say, I know everyone's experience is different, but because I had so much brain fog that was just so heavy with the worry and the anxiety and the what ifs and the checking and rechecking and planning and replanning, now that I don't have to do that so obsessively, I have all of this space to think more creatively, to get more done and to do it more efficiently. So I feel like it's almost made me better at my job, more proficient at my job. And I'm a lot nicer at the end of the day with what I'm on right now.
That's so good. And I think it's so important to share our experiences with things like this, because I have interviewed a whole lot of moms on this show, and both in my own story and your story and so many of their stories, when we reach this breaking point, when we get to this point where we're like, I can't do this anymore. My body is telling me this. I can't keep going like this. So much of it stems back to how we coped or didn't cope with postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression, if we did have them. And postpartum is just a setup, right? I mean, first we grow a human, then we eject our human out into the world one way or another. And then our hormones take like a crazy roller coaster ride. And we're keeping a human who doesn't give one single shit if we want to sleep or not. And we're keeping them alive. And we're like trying to like fit in our genes. The whole thing is bullshit. But truly, that sets us up for like, if we were like, oh, we're good. Like that is enough to push anyone over the edge. And then as moms, we just figure it out, right? We figure out coping mechanisms. We like, all right, I can do this. I don't need help. I can do it. And then that just continues until our kids leave for college. Like it's not, unless we say, hey, something here is not right. And this is not how I want to feel. It's not the way I want to show up. It's not the way I want to treat people.
Right.
So do you feel like for you that was like one day you were like, I need help, or it was like gradual over time, like I just don't want to feel like this anymore?
It was so gradual. I wish that there was like a turning point where it was like, okay, here's the day, like this is the day. But no, it was 5 steps forward, 90 steps back. Like it was just bad. And I kept on saying like, it's just this season. I'm just tired. I'm just pregnant. I just have a pandemic baby. I just got a Down syndrome diagnosis. It was always an excuse of this is happening right now and it's not going to keep on happening. And then after a while, you can't keep on using excuses. After a while, your excuses run out and you're like, this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life unless I do something to help myself. And I did the self-care. I did all the things I will always recommend, like, instead of just going straight to medication, try things out, like try things that will work for you. But then at one point you get to a point where it's like, no, this is no longer helping. I need more help. And that's where talking to a therapist, medication, I mean, those things have definitely helped me. And I'm so proud that they're part of my story.
I think as moms, historically, we're really not great at saying, I need more help.
Yeah.
In any area, right? Like it can be, I need more help with groceries or childcare or cooking or cleaning. I need more help. And it is okay to need, it's normal to need more help.
Right. Or you're trying to grab it from your partner, like the one person who also feels like they need more help. And then it's just this resentful game of, but do you see how much I'm doing? Like you're not pulling even any of the weight. And it's like, okay, we got to get help from somewhere. Like if you're not able to support yourselves and then support your other person, you got to get help from somewhere. But you're exactly right, Tracy. It's really, really difficult to throw in the towel and be like, I can't do this. I actually can't do this.
And I think I can't, I won't, and no, as moms are such powerful phrases because it shows us that we are not able to do all the things, nor are we supposed to. And it helps us to ask for help or to outsource help or to just say to friends and family who love us, hey, I know you've been like really asking when you get to see the baby, but what I really need is like a lasagna and a nap.
That's literally what it is. Yes.
Right? Like I don't like I need you to come here, do laundry while you bake my lasagna, while you hold my baby so I can sleep. And like they're going to do it just like you and I would do it if someone told us that's what they need.
That's exactly it. And being so specific with it, and again, I'm generalizing, but a lot of times as women, we're like, okay, well, if my friend's coming over to see the baby, I should probably shower and brush my teeth and like have some food ready for them. It's like, no, how about instead you don't brush your teeth and you use that time to like go take a bath by yourself while they make food for you and while they hold your baby.
Yes.
But it's until we start to do that for other people and then open up the capacity. It's like when you have the capacity, help other people. And then when you don't have the capacity, ask for it, knowing that it's not tit for tat, but knowing that sometimes you're going to be holding too many balls and sometimes your hands are going to be empty and you're going to want to help somebody else out. So it's just that give and take that really makes the village that we speak about actually work. But you got to ask for help and you got to be able to put those balls down when they're so heavy that they need to be dropped and be like, yeah, someone pick them up.
Yes, yes. And I, as the recipient of help, I think that I loved when our church brought us meals when our babies were newborns. I was just like, yes, it felt so good. I don't have to cook. It's in an aluminum pan. I don't have to do dishes. Cause we have 2 kids that are like 10 years older than our babies. So I had like hungry, growing 12-year-old boys who they needed to eat. Right. And I was like, I could live on cereal. Right. But they wanted a meal. So like they needed to eat. And since then, when someone has a baby, it can literally be like someone I sort of kind of know at work. And I'm like, I will feed you.
Yes.
And they're like, that's weird, but okay. I just because I know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that when you're in the season where you're like, I'm still in my pajamas. It's 7 p.m. Are we even going to eat dinner? And it feels so good. But honestly, I think giving the meals away feels actually better than receiving them.
Oh, see, and you're the type of people that's like, bring those people into the world, because when you're able to feed somebody, and there's something about food, there's definitely something
Oh,
about food.
yes.
And I'm not
Yes.
even a good cook, but I'm damn good at like sending like a Venmo, or having the DoorDash actually drive it to the person's house and be like, you don't have to think about it. Like, do you want Thai, pizza, or Mexican? It'll be there in 45 minutes. Um, so just like being able to take the thing off of your mind, like not have to think about something, like fueling yourself so that you can recover well and feed your baby in whatever capacity you're feeding your baby. Like just having that one thing taken off your plate. Oh, dang, it's good.
All right. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about things that you do to take care of yourself in this season where you have these businesses that serve the moms and you take care of your kids and you're showing up in your marriage and friendships. What are you doing to take care of Abby during this very busy time?
Yeah. And for people who follow me personally, they know that I'm very structured, very type A, very organized. So this answer might throw you off a little bit, but I really listen to myself in that moment on that day. So one of my co-hosts, Amy Kiefer, for instance, she always works out at 4 p.m. And Kat, our other co-host, she has like structure in her day too, of like she always drops her kids off in the morning and like has this extra time in the morning with them. For me, some days I love to wake up and start working right away. Other days I want a workout right away in the morning. Other days like today, I came home and took a nap because that's what I needed. So there are days where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to force this workout or force getting extra work done or force myself to meditate or force myself to go for a walk. Like, what do you need today, Abby? What do you need today? But there's always some form of movement, whether it's a really, really hard workout or literally just going for a 5-minute walk outside just to get some fresh air, going down to the mailbox and then taking another couple of steps. Like just having a little bit of movement, I do think is so beneficial for me. I don't know who it's not beneficial for. People who just try it, even if it's just a little bit. My husband's in that right now where he just hasn't been outside in a very long time. And he took his first walk this weekend. He's like, dang, that felt really good. I'm like, join the club, babe. That's why I do it every day. And then, I mean, I have this huge water bottle. Like it's so simple, but just getting your basic human needs met. So the meals, like we talked about before, the water, the sleep, and those things be like, yeah. I know those things. I know those things. But
Yeah,
if you
but are
don't
you doing
actually
them?
do them, right? If you don't actually do them, nothing else works. You can't get a killer workout in if you're on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. You just can't do it. You can't feel good and energized in your body if you're eating leftover chicken nuggets and, peanut butter and jelly crusts. You just can't do it. So thinking about your basic human needs and nailing those first before trying to build on all these habits, that's literally what I want most women just to start with.
Yeah. And I think that intuitive approach, there's such value in that. And also we can learn so much about ourselves in that process of, I have this hour. What do I feel like I need? Like, what do I feel like is going to be a blessing to me in this hour that's going to leave me feeling better one way or another? And it doesn't always have to be better in the same way, but just better, and kind of tuning into what do I need? And if it's rest, I'm going to rest. And if it's movement, I'm going to move. There is such power in understanding and sort of decoding what we need. Because I think we spend a lot of our lives like, well, the calendar says this. So like, I'm going for a run, even if I want a nap. Like, let's get rid of that and start really figuring out like what we actually need in this hour of this day of this season of our lives. Because that's really the only moment that we're living for, is the one that we're in.
Oh, so true. And I'll take it even further by breaking it down into 10 or 15-minute segments. So sometimes we do think we need this full hour, and sometimes we do. Like today, I definitely needed a full hour just to lay down and be away. We had an incredible launch day today. So it was a whole bunch of energy, a whole bunch of excitement, a whole bunch of adrenaline at the beginning of the day that all of a sudden the afternoon came. I'm like, whoa, I cannot be a human right now. Like I need to go lay down. But even in those little 10 to 15-minute segments of our life, we can think that we don't have enough time to be mindful or to connect with ourselves. But like opening up a journal and writing down a few things that fuel you. Like I love doing that, just a few things. Or if you, opening up a Bible prompt and just, getting into the word, or going for that walk, or going for that run, or calling a friend. I mean, 15 minutes, if you're doing that a few times a day, that's a lot of 15 minutes that you're probably wasting doing something else right now.
Scrolling social media, or doing something. I mean, that's what we're. mostly doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like thinking about, oh, I should really do this. Oh, I should really do this. Oh, I should really do this. And you've been in bed saying, oh, I should really do this. Get up and go for a workout for 9 minutes. And you could have already had half your workout done.
So speaking of social media, if people are loving you and this content and this, unique take that you bring to the world, where can listeners go to find more of you?
Yeah, I show up almost every day on Abby Rose Green. So ABBYROSE, green like the color. And then also on Herself podcast and Pursuing Her Purpose. So Pursuing Her Purpose is mostly for the business women in this crew, especially those who have a budding idea that they want to get off the ground and into the world. We definitely support our entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and those who are entre-curious over there. And then Herself is really about women getting one step ahead of where they are as a wife, as a mother, as an individual. So we support our community in those ways on that page.
Awesome. Well, Abby, thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable and sharing a whole lot of you and your story with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for asking such great questions. These are good ones the world needs more of these questions, because when you can start asking these questions, Tracy, that's when the world gets the answers that they actually need.
Yeah, I think we need to ask ourselves and other people questions that make us feel like a little bit nauseous. And then we'll start really getting somewhere with the way that we're connecting with other people, for sure.
Love it.
Awesome. I'm doing a victory dance right now because you did it. You took the time to tune in, to reach for a better life, and to take care of you. Did our time together go by way too fast for anyone else? Head to fulfilledasamom.com for show notes and all the discount codes from today's show. You now have the tools and knowledge to change your life. Go blaze your trail, take that step, make the shift, and do the work to create fulfillment in your life today.